Hey, what's up guys, it's next time. Today, we're going to be looking at Inside by Playdead, a game that's been called a masterpiece, at least according to IGN, Giant Bomb, and Polygon. I'm not here to say that Inside isn't a masterpiece, however I do feel this game has issues just like any other game. What's interesting to me is that when I went online to look at the reviews for this game, two terms seem to always crop up. That's masterpiece and experience. A lot of reviews consisted of people calling this game either a masterpiece or a great experience, and I found myself wondering why. Why is it a masterpiece? How is it an experience? And nowhere did I read anything that satisfied me as an explanation. It was like these two words were clouds in my head, and I just couldn't quite give them shape until I went onto Steam and saw that this game had the Steam tag of Story Rich. And just like that, everything clicked. Please, join me as I explain why Inside is a compelling experience to play, and what Inside is a masterpiece of. Well, real quick, let's go through some legal stuff. I will be talking about all the elements in the game, so consider this your spoiler warning. What I am presenting is my own humble opinion. Please don't consider it anything more than that. Just like you, I can change my mind. This doesn't mean this is how I feel about the game forever for all eternity. I am very interested to see why you guys think this game is a masterpiece or an experience. Please leave a comment below. I'd love to read them. I know this is the internet, so please be respectful. We're here to have a discussion. It's not a pecker measuring contest. To begin our quest to find out why Inside is a masterpiece, I think it's important that we're all on the same page when we use the word masterpiece. I consulted the greatest source of information and the future god of humanity, Google, for the answer. Here you can see the two definitions. The first one states that a masterpiece is a work of outstanding artistry, skill, or workmanship. To me, this definition is too broad. The definition we will be using for this video is the historical one, that states a masterpiece is a piece of work by a craftsman accepted as qualification for membership of a guild as an acknowledged master. I know this sounds almost exactly like the first definition, but I think the key difference here is that the historical definition tries to measure a piece of work and scrutinize it to see if it's good enough to be called a masterpiece. To me, the piece of work is obviously the game, and the definition implies that the entirety of the game doesn't have to be perfect in order for it to be considered a masterpiece. Instead, the piece of work has to illustrate that the craftsman, in this case Playdead, has an understanding of a set of concepts that can be applied to a game, and skilled enough to execute them properly in the game. In other words, for a piece of work to be called a masterpiece, the craftsman needs to know what to do and how to do it well. It's here that I would like to take a minute and describe a recurring issue I had with Inside, for two main reasons. One is to show that this game isn't perfect. It has its fair share of problems like any other game. And two, to contrast the issue this game has with the mastery Playdead was able to execute to turn this game into a success. Playdead got so much right, it cast a big enough shadow that people forget about what Playdead got wrong in their game. I'll only show one mistake that I believe really highlights the issue I found throughout the entire game. At its core, removing graphics and sound effects, Inside is a 2D puzzle platformer, meaning its job is to introduce puzzle mechanics and weave them together in interesting and engaging ways. I can confidently argue that Playdead does a very bad job at this, and I can show you this with how blocks are handled in the game. Combing through the entire game, I counted 18 times where part of the puzzle was to grab a box, push it somewhere so I can reach something. Adding to that, if you consider the mob of drones as pseudo block that follow you around, remember, we are taking graphics out of the picture and only focusing on the puzzle elements of the mechanics. These drones act like a box that follow you around, and you can climb that box whenever you want. Counting this makes the number climb up to 28. Even still, if you consider the number of times the block was already there, so that you don't have to push it, that number jumps up to 34 times. 34 times! That's way too many times for a small game like this. Inside is like, what, 2 hours? 3 tops? meaning that on average, the game requires you to mess with a block every 5 minutes. I mean, look at the beginning of the game. You're here. Then right after that, guess what? You have to do it again. That's not necessary, and I can't for the life of me understand why this puzzle element is repeated twice at the beginning. You can see it here. Here. And a nice wrinkle here where you have to activate the fly box to get it to the top. This uninteresting level design almost ruined the game for me, and I probably would have stopped playing it if it wasn't for what Playdead got right in its game. And that is, in my opinion, Inside is a masterpiece of poetic gaming. Now, obviously, what do I mean by poetic gaming? Please don't Google it, because I made it up. I gleaned this from analyzing Inside as a whole, and I'll be explaining it throughout the rest of the video. Playdead's mastery of poetic gaming comes from two concepts it skillfully executes. The first is their ability to weave spectacle into the gameplay. The second is their ability to tell a poetic, almost broken story. I know this list looks thin, so let me take you through some examples just to show you how strong these concepts are. Let's look at weaving spectacle into the game. Spectacle is something cool or interesting happening in the game, and one of the first scenes we encounter are a bunch of dudes being loaded into trucks. I don't know about you, but this gave me Nazi vibes. A little bit further, if you mess up, you'll see a grown man choke a kid to death. Just a little past that, the mysterious guards sick a dog on you. And if you're not fast enough, it will catch you and you'll get to see a kid mauled to death. In fact, almost every section of the game has some sort of spectacle associated to it. These events are found throughout the entire game. And, I mean, they're great and all, but how is this proof that they consciously weaved spectacle into the game? How would we be able to tell if they added this on purpose, or just because it's cool, or just for its shock value? The answer to that is by seeing how Inside handles its music. You've probably noticed that most of the game is played in silence, with nothing but the sound of the kid's footsteps. And whatever he might be interacting with, like the sound of the box being dragged, whatever this thing is, or the rustling in the cornfield. These moments are almost as silent as possible. That is, until a spectacle event occurs that the game highlights with music, in an attempt to force you to pay attention. A big one for me was watching those drones in a giant line in the background. You're going forward, it's super quiet, then bam! The game surprises you by having the floor tear open and dropping you right in the middle of the line. You may not have noticed, but the music here kicks in, highlighting the fact that this moment was intentional and bringing your mind to focus. You are no longer just quietly sneaking around at your own leisure. You're right smack in the middle of the enemy's line of sight. Another moment is here, when you're drowned by this weird little kid. It's quiet, just another rope to climb, when the catwalk gives and you fall and you get caught by that kid. And as you slowly watch your character get drowned, the music shifts into an almost dreamlike quality, highlighting that this is not the end, but the beginning of something new. And the music lasts for a while. In fact, it lasts all the way until you encounter the next puzzle. The last example I'll give is arguably the best moment of spectacle in the game. This one is important because it shows that Playdead knows when to use music to highlight an event and when to take it away to achieve the same effect. When you first see the aquarium holding the blob, you're moving forward past a bunch of weird scenes in the background. You find a group of men huddled around what looks like a giant tank of water. You'll notice the music is playing here too. The music plays up until you start making your way into the tank. Then once inside the tank, the music stops. When you pull the pieces of electronics off the blob, and you get absorbed, no music. There also isn't music when you break out. Only noise from the chaos you've created, the screams of the employee, and the glass as you break through, giving it a more realistic approach to the shock of what is happening. Here, they understand that sometimes the best music is no music, to add a sense of realism and allow the player to come to terms with what's happening. You are the blob now. You've just escaped. This is happening. With the music acting as our guide, it's clear that the spectacle events were intentional and the focus of the game. From where the spectacle event starts to when it finishes, music is also there to highlight it, right down from when it starts to when it ends. This alone is the reason why Inside is considered an experience. It does a fantastic job of pulling emotions out of you. These events aren't just things someone can tell you so you can get the picture. They are things that need to be felt. For example, if someone tells you, yeah, you'll get drowned by this weird little human mermaid thing, that's completely different from watching that water creature break into your sub and drown you. Or like when you get into an elevator, something that's been established as safe to the player, only to ride it again and watch helplessly as it gets torn apart by that sonic boom in the background, crashing you into the water and transforming this one safe space into a drowning death sentence. I can't stress that enough. These events are found throughout the entire game, and it's something that I believe is what makes people describe this game as an experience. You just have to play it in order to understand. Now that we've covered how Inside weaves spectacle into the game, let's talk about how Inside creates a poetic story. To me, a story needs to have characters to tell it, a setting to give the characters a place to tell it, and interesting plot points weaved together with conflict and climax. To me, a poetic story has all of these elements, except it's missing the plot points being weaved together. Inside fits this perfectly. It has characters, it's got a vague dystopian setting, it's got conflict. There's armed guards with attack dogs looking to stop a seeming little boy by any means necessary. There's climax, like when you finally get inside the tank and become one with the blob. Inside has all of these elements that make up a story, except they're not strung together. The best part is that these elements have a significant level of detail to them that implies a connected story. Take for example these weird tanks in the background. It's one of the first things we see, and they act as little Easter eggs. They feel like they're placed there on purpose. And later in the game, we find out that there's possibly drones inside, because this one that we get to touch and open. Or how about the mysterious little drowned kids? They look like experiments. We even get to see one hooked up to some kind of machine in a place that looks like an abandoned lab. That's a lot of detail, and it doesn't feel like it's for nothing. Or take for example the drones you see in Control. There's a lot of drones. They're trucked around, quality controlled, experimented on. I mean, they're just hanging upside down in the roof with magic floating water. This doesn't feel random. It feels like we're missing something. And that's the key to understanding what Inside is actually about. That's why everything clicked for me when I saw that story-rich tag on Steam. Inside is not telling you a story, it's describing loosely connected plot points where the events are incredibly detailed. I mean, there were moments where I strongly felt the story was happening outside of us, and we weren't even aware of it. For example, at the beginning, there's guards who are hell-bent on making sure no one comes near, not even a kid that might be wandering in by accident. If they find you, they're gonna kill you, no questions asked. Like, why do they act like they're expecting you? They're out in the woods in the middle of the night with flashlights and attack dogs. They're not there for fun, they're there to work. You spend most of your time in abandoned buildings. They're quiet and eerie. This is not where the action is happening. Even when you use that drone to push you towards that giant door on the floor so you can fall in, you clearly see the worker looking up and reacting towards you. It was at this point I felt like the story was going to kick up a notch. Like, okay, the guards gotta react to me being here somehow, right? Nope. The game goes on as usual. What about when you steal a sub? Like, I know you snuck up on them and they might not notice right away, but they're eventually gonna, and I bet they're gonna want it back. Does anything happen for stealing the sub? Nope. You just have a sub now. It's things like these that made me feel like the story was happening in the background somewhere else. Even when you're super close to the aquarium, no one is looking at you. They're looking at the blob. Something is happening to the blob we don't know. This guy knows. These people seem to know. Glad to have been a part of it and not understand my role in anything. And I know what some of you guys are thinking. We followed the narrative of the little boy up until the end. Doesn't that count as the plot points being strung together? To that I say, not necessarily. I mean, how much of it made any sense without the need to dig deeper? Let me give you an example to contrast the game's story. Say for instance, you're reading a mystery novel. Then at the end, the ending doesn't make any sense. I mean, you read it, the blob stopped moving at the end. Was that a good story? How about when you go to your book club to discuss the book? You find out that everyone in there seems to have a different idea of what happened in the end. Does that make it a good story? Or does that mean the story wasn't told properly? If the point of the story is to have it make sense, then Inside isn't a story because what it presents to the player doesn't make sense. This is why the story rich tag, I feel, is undeserved. Inside doesn't have a story. It has loosely connected plot points with enough rich detail to allow the player to come up with their own interpretations of what happened. Some might see these pods as drone growers, while others might see them as dehumanization chambers to put your prisoners of war into to turn them into a reliable workforce. Is this quality control, or on commentary on society's education system and what it values, like seeing how only those drones that do what they're told seem to pass while everyone else with an ounce of autonomy gets killed? Or this, is this some kind of drone hive mind, or a sad Frankenstein's monster that just got the chance at freedom and took it? Even the child, he's not wandering around in the dark forest for fun. He didn't happy chance his way into that aquarium. He's deliberately beelining it to the blob. Like, I know it's a 2D platformer, so he can only really go in two directions, but in the context of the world, he is moving in a straight line towards that blob. Is he a spy? Is he a drone? Is he being controlled by someone we don't know? I don't know. All of these questions appear to have an answer, and that's what Playdead does best in this game. It gives us just enough information to piece together our own version of events, while at the same time not giving us too much information that only one theory is correct. It allows for our imagination to run wild with speculation, and a pocket full of evidence to lend it credibility. It's fun. I think theory crafting is a big part of Inside. By building on these two pillars of weaving spectacle into the game and telling a poetic story, Playdead has been able to turn a small game that I personally found boring with repetitive puzzle mechanics into a masterpiece that people online stress needs to be experienced. I'm not just saying that for fun. I genuinely believe the level design in the game is boring and lazy. What kept me going, and what I enjoyed the most out of this game, was experiencing the spectacle and the theory crafting, which, to me, seemed like the focus of the game. Inside truly is a masterpiece. Playdead have shown that they can take a boring game and make it a hit, and I think that's something worth using as a rubric for future games. If you want to invoke similar emotions in your game, look at how Inside surprises the player by introducing safe areas and then flipping them upside down and turning them into dangerous areas. And if you want to tell a story that's chock full of theory crafting, then tell them a broken poetic story with detail-rich plot points. And finding that magic balance between theory crafting, where many theories can be considered valid, over breadcrumbs, where only one solution can be the answer. And that's why I believe Inside should be considered a masterpiece. If you're still watching, thank you for taking this walk with me on the amazing game that is Inside. I think it's safe to say you guys are, like me, looking to understand the game at a deeper level. Feel free to leave a comment telling me your theory on why Inside is a masterpiece. I'd love to read them. It's also only fair since you sat through my entire explanation. Hats off to you. That's it for now, and I'll see you guys next time.